Hello and welcome to week 7 here in plant biology. We are making our way through the content. This week's reading are chapters 4 and chapter 5 in our Concepts of Biology book. So this is the other OER textbook. So we're not reading chapter 4 and 5 in the Biology 2E. We're reading chapters 4 and 5 in the Concepts of Biology this week. So that's an important change to note. Again, the Concepts of Biology gives more of a conceptual overview of these ideas, and I think for this class, when we're talking about energy and metabolism, and then the basics of photosynthesis, I think this is a good starting point. So there's a lot of reading associated with this week, so we're going to scale back some of the lab opportunities and things like that so you can focus more on the reading, and then there'll be some case study questions as well. So keep working through your lab material from the previous weeks, and this week, we're going to focus on doing some more reading, again, chapters 4 and 5 in the Concepts of Biology text. Chapter 4 and 5 are closely linked to one another. They're both about energy and how cells, in particular plant cells, because this is plant biology, but because plants are eukaryotic cells, they are cells, how these cells access the energy that they have, and how do they build their energy reserves, because plants are unique in the ability to harvest energy from the sun and build that energy into a usable form for themselves. Chapter 4 starts out talking about energy generally, and we're talking about metabolism, the sort of totality of the biochemistry in an organism that drives us to be alive, the chemical functionings that make us live. That's what metabolism is. And when we're talking about metabolism, we're really talking about how organisms are using and utilizing energy resources. The primary energy resource that we're going to be talking about in this class, and the energy resource that drives all of plant life, is the sun. The sun is the ultimate source of energy for the vast majority of life on this planet, and definitely the only source of energy for plants on this planet. It's all sunlight-derived energy. If you look at figure 4.2 in the book, we see how energy moves through these systems. We start with the sun, and we have producers, which are plants, photosynthetic organisms, that are harvesting this energy, and then consumers are eating those plants. The plants are dying and they're decomposing. In the end, all this energy eventually gets released as heat. It's sort of an odd way to think about it, but it's from an energetic standpoint, that's the way it works. The sunlight energy that's collected by plants and turned into sugars is turned into potential energy in the form of these sugar chemicals and sugar compounds. These sugar compounds are then broken down. Heat is released as a process. Some of that heat or some of that energy gets put back to use, but these are very inefficient systems, and so there's always a lot of waste heat. It's a good thing that the sun rises every morning and continues to feed these systems. If that stopped, the inefficiencies in our sort of energy systems on this planet would come to a screeching halt very, very fast. When we look at these metabolic pathways, we can see that the burning of sugars in cells and the building of sugars in chloroplasts are essentially reverses of one another. In the case of photosynthesis, we're starting with carbon dioxide and water, and we're building sugars and oxygen. When we're using those sugars, when we're utilizing them, we're taking those sugars and taking oxygen and turning them back into water and carbon dioxide. Where plants fit into this sort of scheme is that they're this midpoint where they can actually do the photosynthetic part. Plants are also using those sugars. Definitely, they are undergoing these breakdown processes as well, but they also have the ability to build these sugars so that they can self-sustain. We as heterotrophic organisms cannot self-sustain. We don't get to go outside at lunchtime with no clothes on and stand in the sun and say, I'm eating. We need to eat other things. Plants, they get to stand outside naked and eat all day long in the sunshine. Not a bad life if you're a plant. And so we have these different types of reactions. We have these what are called catabolic reactions and anabolic reactions. Catabolic reactions are reactions that break things down. So when we're breaking down these sugars and harvesting this energy, those are catabolic reactions. We also have anabolic reactions where we're building things up. So photosynthesis in that process is an anabolic process where we're harvesting energy from the sun and building more complex sugars from that. We talk about energy as this source for driving of life processes. And when we're talking about energy, we need to be able to talk about energy transfers or transformations. Energy is transferred every time we eat something. We're transferring chemical energy from one organism to the next. Photosynthesis is a form of energy transfer as well, where we're taking energy from the sun and converting it into a usable sugar. These energy transfers are very inefficient, as I already said, but they're necessary for life. And when we're looking at energy, we're not creating energy, we're simply transforming it. And these transformations are always inefficient. So when we're shifting from light energy to chemical energy, it's not a very efficient process. Then when we shift from these chemical energy sources into kinetic energy or movement energy, then we lose a whole lot of inefficiency. When we look at sort of the ecosystem level, so if we look at the sort of broader level, every time we get these sorts of energy transfers from one group of organisms to the next, we lose about 90% of that energy. It just burns off as heat. That's why, as a human, we're not as big as the totality of the food that we eat. We generally stay a moderate size. We just lose a lot of this energy as heat. And you can feel that the heat against your skin is that heat energy being lost from these systems. When we look at energy, we are talking about these different forms of potential energy. So chemicals are a form of potential energy, or these organic chemicals that we're talking about anyways are forms of potential energy. Energy is being stored in these sugars. It's a way for organisms to hold on to energy in a way that is reasonably fast to access, but also doesn't just overheat their systems altogether. They want to hold this potential energy in the form of these chemical bonds and move it into kinetic energy, and that's really what we're talking about when we're talking about these processes of glycolysis and oxidative phosphorylation, which we talk about later in the chapter. We do need to talk a little bit about energy and chemical reactions. So there are two main types of chemical reactions. We're going to have exergonic and endergonic reactions. Exergonic reactions are spontaneous. They will happen by themselves. They simply require a little bit of energy to put in, and then they go by themselves, and they release excess energy into the world. These are breakdown reactions. Anytime we're breaking something apart and releasing this chemical energy, it's going to be an endergonic reaction. I'm sorry, an exergonic reaction. Endergonic reactions are the opposite. These are where we're building things, where we're collecting energy and putting it to use to build something else. These require constant energy inputs and don't release energy as part of that process, and those are endergonic reactions. They are non-spontaneous. Exergonic reactions are spontaneous. Spontaneity doesn't necessarily mean they happen suddenly, but they will happen by themselves eventually. Rusting, for example, is a spontaneous reaction. It doesn't happen fast, but it happens eventually by itself. Endergonic reactions would be, say, like the building of proteins would be an endergonic reaction. It takes energy to do that. And building that energy means that we're reducing the disorder in the world. And so these are low entropy processes, these endergonic reactions. When we're breaking things apart, we're increasing the entropy or the disorder in the universe. That's those sorts of reactions. When we're talking about chemical reactions, we also have to talk about enzymes. Enzymes are specialized proteins that move these chemical reactions forward in a faster manner. They lower what's called the activation energy of these processes, and that means that the spontaneous reactions happen faster. If we didn't have enzymes, our chemical reactions would still occur spontaneously. They would just not occur spontaneously enough for life as we know it to exist. So enzymes are critical in the functioning of biological systems. Enzymes are specific to what are called the substrates that they work on. Only one enzyme is going to work on one substrate, and they fit together very closely. It used to be described as what's called a lock and key model, so you'd have this exact fit. That was our understanding. We have a shift in our understanding and a better understanding of how these work, and we have what's called an induced fit, where the active site on the enzyme doesn't quite fit the substrate exactly, but when that substrate comes into contact, a better fit is induced, and it fits tightly then. And the enzyme then works on the reactants and does a breakdown reaction or the synthesis reaction, whichever way this reaction is going. All of these processes in this metabolic chain are linked together as part of these homeostatic mechanisms to maintain these balance points within an organism. When we're talking about metabolic processes, we're really talking about the breakdown or the building of adenosine triphosphate, or ATP. ATP is sort of the cash currency of biological systems. Every cell on this planet uses ATP as its ultimate energy source to do the things it needs to do. ATP is ubiquitous in life, as we know it on this planet. That energy in this process comes from breaking off this last phosphate group, and so when we break that final chemical bond, it releases a bunch of energy that cells then put to use. All right, I think that sort of covers the beginnings of energy and enzymes, and I think I'm going to put a new video up, and we're going to talk about glycolysis and citric acid cycle and the oxidative phosphorylation in the electron transport chain. We'll cover that in a second video, and we'll see how we're doing on time, and I might put a third one up talking about photosynthesis. So again, this week, chapters 4 and 5 in Concepts of Biology. It's a reading heavy week. If you have questions, please ask in the discussion forum. Please check with your classmates and check with me. If you want to email me, of course, that's fine. So look for the second and possibly third parts of this video, and I will talk at you later.